Dragons have been fascinating creatures in myths, legends, and folklore across cultures for centuries. Stories of dragons can be found in various cultures throughout the world. Dragons are prominent in Chinese, European, and Norse mythology, among others. Each culture interprets and portrays dragons differently, showcasing their ability to captivate the imaginations of people worldwide. In many legends, dragons are known for their shape-shifting abilities. They could take on various forms, including human or animal disguises, further adding to their mystique and enhancing their interaction with humans. Dragons are often associated with elements such as fire and water. Fire dragons are portrayed as powerful and destructive creatures, breathing fire and guarding treasures. Water dragons, on the other hand, are often depicted as benevolent and protective, associated with bodies of water and rain. Dragons hold significant symbolic meaning in different cultures. For instance, in Chinese culture, dragons symbolize power, strength, and good luck. In European tradition, they're often associated with danger and the need for bravery. These diverse interpretations reflect the complex and enduring nature of dragon mythos. Dragons frequently feature in art, literature, and popular culture, showcasing their enduring popularity. From ancient cave paintings to modern films and novels, dragons continue to captivate artists and storytellers, making them a constant presence in our collective imagination. It's interesting to note that dragon-like creatures are not limited to mythology or folklore. For example, the Komodo dragon found in Indonesia is the world's largest living lizard, showcasing a real-life glimpse into the realm of dragons. In Chinese mythology, dragons are considered benevolent and powerful creatures. One famous story is the tale of the Dragon Gate.
Before humans inhabited the earth, the world was populated only by plants and animals, and the gods were proud to behold their creation. One of the many wonders of the divine creation was the famous Yellow River, China's second largest river, which throughout history played an important role in the development of Chinese civilization. The river was filled with many kinds of fish, but a group of colored carp stood in the eyes of the gods because they were always happy and restless. On one occasion, the carp was going about its normal life until it was surprised by the shadow of a hawk flying high in the sky. The carp never knew that there was a world beyond the murky river waters. For the first time in its life, it decided to swim to the surface and see what was above water. The carp could hardly believe its eyes when it finally popped its head out of the water. There lay a world full of wonder, with vibrant colors and sounds, birds flying in the sky, and the balmy warmth of the sunlight. When it had recovered from the initial shock, the carp noticed that an amazingly tall mountain lay some distance away. From the mountaintop flowed a huge waterfall. Eager to find out what it would be like to see the world from the summit, the carp gathered its friends and family together and invited them to embark on a journey to the mountaintop. The brave carp set off together to the peak, but faced numerous obstacles along the way, such as strong currents, rocks, and predatory animals. After enduring many difficulties, only 3 carp remained, but they were now faced with the greatest challenge of all, climbing the big waterfall. Many years went by and the carp kept trying to ascend the waterfall to no avail, being thrown back into the river by the strength of the water. To make things worse, some demons who lived on the mountainside kept making fun of the carp and even tried to get in their way by throwing stones and wood chunks at the fish. After 100 years of hopeless attempts, only one carp remained, the one that had been the first to ever catch a glimpse of the outside world. The long years of single-minded effort had transfigured the carp's body, which was now far larger than a normal fish. Even its head acquired a new shape, resembling that of a snake. But now, not even the mountain demons dared to defy the carp. In a heroic effort, the carp made a huge leap, reaching the summit of the waterfall. Such a display of resilience and determination captured the attention of the heavenly gods. These, overwhelmed by the carp, decided to bless it. As a reward for its efforts, the carp was turned into a mighty golden dragon. It soared into the sky and reached previously unimagined heights, and lived eternally free and happy. Just like the carp that challenged the waterfall, people can also surpass their limits by dedicating themselves to achieving their dreams, and one day reaching their life goals.
The epic poem Beowulf features a fearsome dragon as the final adversary of the hero Beowulf.
Beowulf is the epic adventure story of a heroic young prince who saves a neighboring kingdom by destroying both a troll-like monster and the monster's avenging mother. Later in life, King Beowulf must face a dragon and his own mortality when his own kingdom is threatened. The story is actually a 3,000-line poem composed in Old English in the 8th century and was the first English-language story to be written down. The author is unknown and is simply called the Beowulf Poet. The story takes place in the early to mid-6th century and consists of 2 parts. The first begins with young Prince Beowulf of the Geats. Geatland is the same as the modern-day island of Gotland, which lies in the Baltic Sea just east of Sweden. To the south, in Denmark, King Hrothgar of the Danes is being terrorized by a ravaging, troll-like monster called Grendel. Grendel hates the sounds of happiness and celebrating, so every night he comes to King Hrothgar's magnificent feasting hall to kill and eat the king's warriors. This has been going on for 12 years when Prince Beowulf arrives unannounced with a small band of men. He says he has heard of the trouble and wants to try his hand at destroying the monster. King Hrothgar agrees to let Beowulf try, even though no sword can cut through Grendel's skin. The king offers food and drink and then leaves the hall with Beowulf and the men of Geatland closed up inside. That night, in order to lure Grendel, Beowulf and his men celebrate loudly and boisterously. It works, and Grendel comes to attack them. He kills one of Beowulf's men, but this time he has met his match, for Beowulf, making no attempt to use a sword, battles Grendel hand to hand and succeeds in tearing off the monster's arm at the shoulder. Grendel then flees the feasting hall and goes out into the wilderness, where he dies. All of the warriors celebrate together, but the threat is by no means over. The next night, Grendel's mother, who has no name in the poem and is not clearly described as either human or monster, comes to the feasting hall to take her revenge. She kills one of Hrothgar's best fighters and leaves. But Beowulf follows her to her lair, which is in a cavern at the bottom of a lake. As before, with Grendel, a fierce battle takes place that is largely hand-to-hand. Eventually, as the fight continues, Beowulf sees a greatsword on the cavern wall and is able to use it to behead Grendel's mother. Also in the cavern is the body of Grendel. Beowulf beheads it as well, though the blood from the monster dissolves the greatsword and leaves only the hilt. After getting back to the feasting hall, Beowulf is richly rewarded by King Hrothgar with both gifts and honors. Prince Beowulf then returns in triumph to his home and the family on the island of Geatland. The second part of the story opens some 50 years later, where the aged Beowulf is now the king of Geatland. It seems that a golden cup has been stolen from a dragon, enraging the beast so that it burns the countryside looking for its treasure. Beowulf sets out to fight the dragon, and even though his warriors go with him, he says he will face the creature alone. The battle is a terrible one, and Beowulf is beginning to lose. His men flee to the forest, feeling that they can do nothing against such an enemy. Yet one man does find the courage to remain with King Beowulf, and together they kill the dragon. Beowulf, however, has sustained a mortal wound and dies soon after the battle. The king is given a hero's funeral with his body burned on a pyre. His people then build a great mound near the edge of the sea in Beowulf's memory.
One of the most famous dragon-slaying tales comes from the legend of St. George.
Our tale begins outside the city of Selene. a Roman province in what is now Libya. Lurking in a large pond was an immense dragon. The dragon dominated its environment as it sat at the top of its food chain, and it was not long before it set its sight on Selene, devouring its people and livestock as they came to the pond for water. In order to satiate the dragon's voracious appetite, and assuage it from attacking the townsfolk, it was decreed that every day a sheep be given to the dragon. For a time the ploy worked, but then the dragon's appetite grew, and soon the ordinance called for 2 sheep per day, and then 3. Soon the city of Selene had run out of sheep, but the dragon still had to be fed, lest he turn upon the populace, and the people die of thirst or dragon's wrath. A new solution was brought up, but one that broke the hearts of its citizens. The children and young people of the town would be chosen by lottery to feed the dragon. Whoever the lot fell upon, wealthy or poor, was delivered to the dragon. It was a heavy toll indeed, and each day there were cries of pain over the loss of their children. But what could they do? No one dared question the ordinance of Selene's king, and the city lacked the strength and courage to face the dragon in combat. The dragon may not have attacked the city itself, but it was slowly killing it, piece by piece, child by child. The townsfolk were trapped. They needed a hero. One fateful day, the lot fell upon the daughter of the king. Desperate to save his daughter's life from the beast that waited outside the city gates, the king begged his citizens to draw again, offering them all his wealth just so his daughter would be spared. But his subjects could not be swayed or bought, for they all had given up something more precious to them than gold or silver. The king had no choice but to oblige. The princess was dressed as a bride and taken to be delivered to the waiting dragon. As the princess waited for the monster bound to the spot, it just so happened that at that very moment a knight rode into the clearing. He was adorned in strong armor, a lance in one hand, a white shield in the other, bearing a red cross. This was St. George of Cappadocia, a warrior of some renown and a devout Christian. When he saw the weeping maiden, he ventured forth to learn of her predicament. After explaining to the saint her situation, she urged him to flee the area, save his own life, and leave her to her fate. But no sooner did the words escape her lips that the ravenous dragon appeared before them, ready to consume the two of them. The princess shrieked in fear, but St. George made the sign of the cross and valiantly charged. Their battle raged on, and the sounds of their skirmish rang out across the glade. George battling braver than ever before, and the dragon, for once, battling a worthy opponent. In a last-ditch effort, George thrust his lance clean into the dragon's flank, wounding it deeply. As the dragon was trying to gather itself, St. George freed the princess and had her wrap her girdle about the dragon's neck. Using the girdle as a leash, St. George led the defeated dragon into the city. The townsfolk all at once were astonished and afraid, yet joyful that their princess was unharmed. After reuniting the princess with her father, St. George stood before the stunned crowd and the dying dragon, and offered to put an end to the creature's life and their long suffering, on the condition that they convert to Christianity. It was certainly a small price to pay, after all the suffering they had endured. Upon agreement, St. George beheaded the dragon, ending its cruel life. After the dragon's corpse was carted out of the city with 4 ox carts, St. George proceeded to baptize the king, the princess, and countless citizens, old and young alike. The king granted the brave knight a reward of gold and silver, but George instead urged him to divide it amongst the people. After St. George went along on his way, the king had built a church honoring the Blessed Virgin Mary and the incomparable St. George. And in the place where George struck the dragon and its blood sank into the ground, an immense spring emerged from the soil, whose water was said to be so pure that it could heal any injury and cure any illness. So ends the tale of St. George and the dragon.
In Norse mythology, the Midgard serpent, also known as Jormungand, is a gigantic serpent that encircles the world, biting its own tail.
In Norse mythology, there are many great beasts and monsters, but many of them pale in comparison to Jormungand. In Old Norse, Jormungandr meant great beast, and he was commonly referred to as the Midgard serpent because his body was so big that it could encircle the entire of Midgard. Jormungand was one of the 3 children of Loki, and along with his brother and sister, Hel and Fenrir, their fate was decided when they were born. Loki's daughter Hel was exiled to Niflheim, where she would rule over the underworld. Fenrir was left in Asgard to be fostered by the gods, and Jormungand was cast into the ocean by Odin, where he had hoped the crashing waves would destroy the beast. But to Odin's surprise, Jormungand consumed the ocean until he grew so big that with his tail in his mouth he could encircle the entire of Midgard. Jormungand's physical appearance does vary. In some depictions he appears as a monstrous snake, and in others as a serpent-like dragon. Jormungand was particularly hated by the god Thor, and there are numerous tales of altercations between the two. The hatred began when Thor and a company of other gods visited the land of the giants, where they came across a huge castle. The gates were so large that the combined force of the gods was not enough to get them open. Luckily for the gods, the bars were so big that they could squeeze through them. Upon hearing that he had guests, the king of the castle told the gods that if they expected his hospitality, they would first have to perform a series of feats to impress him. Thor was given the very simple task of lifting the king's pet cat from the ground, a task that was considered so mundane that even the children of the castle could do it. Despite his immense strength, Thor could not complete this task, only managing to lift one of the cat's paws above the ground. Back home in Asgard, Thor was considered more than capable of handling his drink, and so the king challenged him to drain the castle's great drinking horn. Once again, Thor was unable to complete the task, as the level of mead barely fell below the rim. After these failures, Thor was furious and demanded to fight one of the king's fiercest warriors. The king laughed and mocked Thor, telling him the only opponent that would be a fair fight would be the nurse of the castle. Thor begrudgingly accepted the challenge and began to wrestle with the elderly woman, but even in this task he would fail. The next morning when leaving the castle, the king confessed the truth to Thor and the rest of the gods. The tasks that he had given them were more than they appeared. The gods of Asgard had been tricked by powerful enchantment and magic. The king's pet cat that Thor had been asked to lift was in fact Jormungand in disguise, and Thor had nearly pulled the great serpent from the ocean bed that he had been exiled to. The great drinking horn that Thor had drank from was connected to the ocean, and Thor nearly drained the entire sea. The old woman who bested Thor was in fact old age, a feat that no one could conquer. After hearing the truth, Thor turned and swung his hammer at the king, but he vanished along with the castle. From that day on, Thor swore revenge on the king and Jormungand, but he had no idea where to find either of them. There are those who believe that the giant king was in fact Loki in disguise, attempting to unleash his son Jormungand upon the world. After all, Loki was a renowned trickster, and a spell that strong that it could fool the gods so easily would require the talents of someone as powerful as Loki. It wasn't until Thor stumbled across a giant named Hymir, who agreed to take him fishing, that Thor would stumble across Jormungand once again. Thor had thrown a great hook attached to a strong line over the side of the boat, in the hopes that the bait would attract the attention of Jormungand, and that it did. Upon seeing the monstrous serpent, Thor tugged on the line, bringing Jormungand to the surface, and a fierce battle between the two commenced. The giant was so terrified by Jormungand and the rapidly sinking boat that he cut the line, returning the serpent to the deep. Thor was so incensed by Hymir's actions that he swung his hammer with such force, the giant fell overboard and drowned. Jormungand was so terrified after his close encounter with the god that he went into hiding and was rarely seen by humans. Although Thor did not get revenge on the Midgard serpents during their last encounter, the two were destined to meet again while the world burned during Ragnarok. Thor would eventually slay Jormungand, but during the confrontation he suffered multiple bites from the serpent. Jormungand's poison filled Thor's wounds and would eventually result in the death of Thor. Jormungand was a monster of such epic proportions that it's hard to gauge his true size, and just like the rest of Loki's children, he was prophesied to bring about the end of the world, a sequence of events that he most certainly aided in.
These stories offer a glimpse into the rich tapestry of dragon legends across different cultures, showcasing the diversity and enduring appeal of these mythical creatures. Dragons are often associated with immense power and protection. In many cultures, they serve as guardians or protectors of treasures, dynasties, or sacred places. This symbolism represents the ability to overcome obstacles and defend what is precious. Dragons are frequently associated with the elements fire, water, earth, and air. This elemental connection signifies their ability to harness and manipulate these forces, representing the balance of natural elements within the world and ourselves. In Chinese culture, dragons represent the perfect balance between yin and yang, with the yin energy being the female and the yang energy being the male. The union of these energies signifies harmony, unity, and the interconnectedness of the two primal forces. Dragons are often depicted as wise and knowledgeable beings. In the Eastern philosophies, they symbolize wisdom and spiritual enlightenment obtained through lifelong experiences. They guide people on their paths, helping them discover their true potential. Dragons commonly undergo transformations like shedding their skin or changing shape, symbolizing renewal, transformation, and rebirth. These themes illustrate the idea of personal growth, shedding old habits or beliefs, and embracing a new, empowered self. Dragons embody the ability to harmonize seemingly opposing forces such as heaven and earth, water and fire, or chaos and order. Their presence teaches the importance of finding balance in life, embracing both light and dark aspects to achieve equilibrium. Dragons are often associated with spiritual ascension and transcendence. Their ability to fly and dwell in heavenly realms signifies their connection to higher states of consciousness, encouraging individuals to elevate their own spiritual journey. Dragons have a strong presence in the collective consciousness of human beings worldwide. Their continued popularity in art, literature, and folklore suggests a shared fascination and connection with these mystical beings, transcending cultural boundaries. Understanding dragon symbolism allows individuals to tap into their personal power, inner strength, and hidden potentials. Dragon symbology encourages us to embrace our unique qualities and pursue personal growth with confidence and resilience.